Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me.
I was 36 the night my identical twin, Blake, announced his engagement. It was at our parents' place in Edgefield, out on the back deck with the fairy lights and folding chairs like some suburban magazine shoot. I showed up 10 minutes late because traffic on Route 41 was crawling behind some landscaping truck hauling mulch. Blake was holding court by the grill, looking tan and polished, while Aubrey beamed beside him in a white sundress like it was her own soft-focus engagement shoot. I grabbed a beer from the cooler and posted up near the sliding door. The Aubrey and Blake slideshow looped on the big TV inside. Childhood beach photos, kissing selfies, wine tastings. People kept nudging each other like it was royal news. We've been identical since birth, but no one ever saw us the same. Blake was always the star, the looker, the natural, our winner, Dad's favorite phrase. Me? If they were being nice, I was steady. If they weren't, could try harder was the go-to. Even our birthdays told the story. I remember our 10th clear as day. Blake got a bounce house and a Nintendo. I got a sweater 2 sizes too big and a sheet cake with plastic candles from Dollar Tree. Dad joked the sweater would fit if I hustled. Everyone laughed. I didn't. At 17, Blake got a used Toyota Corolla with a bow on the hood. Dad called it seed money for success. I got a handshake and was told I could maybe borrow the family Taurus if I chipped in for gas and insurance, as long as Blake didn't need it first. Same thing at school. Blake's sports fees and tutoring got paid without question. I bagged groceries after football practice just to afford my SATs. The counselor kept asking why my checks were late. I didn't bother explaining. Quick note, before listening, share in the comments which city or country you're watching from, and let's continue. So yeah, I was late to the party that night. But I still raised my bottle when Blake stood up and clinked his glass, said they'd set a date in October. I was happy for him, in a quiet way. He's still my twin, no matter how crooked the scoreboard. Then Dad, already 3 whiskeys deep, puffed out his chest and said, loud enough for the neighbors to hear, "Finally, one of my boys isn't a train wreck." He pointed straight at me when he said it. The words hit like a thrown wrench. Mom chimed in with, "We always knew which twin had the spark," then smiled toward Aubrey's parents like she was accepting a damn trophy. One of the aunts, probably Donna, snorted into her napkin. My 13-year-old nephew piped up, "Uncle Evan, are you the practice twin?" A few people laughed like it was nothing. Blake didn't even look at me, just stared at his shoes, then glanced up and gave me that familiar smirk like, "Don't make a scene." I counted 20 seconds in my head. That used to be my trick as a kid. Count to 20. Don't react. Keep steady. Then I stood up, pulled $55 from my wallet, and set it by my plate, enough to cover whatever I ate and drank. No speech, no slam. Just walked out. By the time I hit my car, my phone was already going off. "Don't be soft," from Dad. "Lighten up," from Mom. And from Blake. "Bro, seriously, not tonight." I blocked them all before I hit the county line, got home, tossed my shoes by the door, and went to bed without brushing my teeth. Slept like I'd just set down a bag I'd been carrying since grade school. I didn't wake up sad. I woke up clear. The next morning, I woke up before the alarm. No buzz from the group thread. No reminder that Blake was killing it or crushing it or whatever word Mom was using that week to say I wasn't. Only quiet. I walked into the kitchen, stood in the weak sunlight by the sink, and actually heard my fridge humming like it was part of the conversation. I work dispatch for Low Country Dispatch, lining up drivers, keeping schedules tight, dealing with warehouse delays and drivers who think GPS is a suggestion. It's not exciting, but it's steady, and after years of drama, that was the point. I'd moved into a second-floor walk-up across town. Just me, a futon, and a fridge loud enough to drown out thoughts I didn't want. 2 days into the silence, I noticed I was breathing different, like I wasn't bracing for the next jab. My therapist called it creating space. I called it finally being able to think straight. That first weekend, I dusted off an old hobby, leather work. I'd used to make belts and wallets in my kitchen back when I was married, before the split and the constant juggling. I opened the old bin of scraps and started cutting, tooling, staining. No rush, just hands working. I built a tiny online shop, Cold River Leather, and posted 5 items. Didn't expect much, but I shipped 2 wallets before Sunday. It felt weird to see tracking numbers going to places like Kansas and Ohio. Felt better than most birthdays I've had. Tuesday night, my cousin Tessa texted. She said, "Coffee? Just you and me." She's the only one I didn't block. Married, baby on the way, keeps her nose clean. She's not a gossip. When we met up at Cup and Clover, she looked like she hadn't slept in days. She stirred her decaf 3 times before saying anything. "Blake's promotion got yanked," she said. His boss flagged his expense reports. Said something about inconsistencies. Not good. I just nodded, sipping my coffee. I wasn't going to jump on the pile. Then she added, "Whitmans are pushing for a prenup now." Big shift in tone. "And Mom's telling people you'll come around like always." I didn't answer that one. Just leaned back and watched the steam rise off my cup. It was nice to let someone talk and not have to defend myself. On the way home, I pulled up next to a Lexus IS 350F Sport at a red light. Same one Blake got last year. He hand-washed that thing in winter, covered the seats like they were museum pieces. That car was Blake. All polish, no scratches. Mine was a 10-year-old Honda with chipped paint and a squeaky brake, but it got me home. I remembered sitting at the kitchen table when I was 22, watching Dad write a check for Blake's tuition while telling me college isn't for everyone. I went to night school, worked warehouse shifts, paid in cash. It didn't buy me respect, but it got me a degree. 10 days without a text or call from any of them felt like coming up from underwater. Around day 11, I noticed my phone didn't buzz after 7. I actually slept through the night. No dreams of being left behind or showing up late to a party I wasn't invited to. I started hitting the Y again 3 nights a week. Didn't talk much. Just lifted, ran, let my brain go quiet. One night in the weight room, I ran into Shane, old friend from high school, used to skate behind the strip mall with me. He looked me up and down and said, "Damn, man, you look lighter." I didn't feel lighter, but I didn't argue. Cold River sold a custom belt to a guy in Missouri for $90. I packed it clean, wrote a thank you note by hand, and realized I felt better boxing that belt than I did on any of my last 5 birthdays. I wasn't waiting for anyone's approval. I was delivering. Saturday morning, I set up a plastic folding table at the Edgefield Farmers Market. Brought 5 belts and a sign I printed at work. Sold 2 before noon. One guy shook my hand and said he hadn't worn a belt in 5 years, but this one makes me want to tuck in my shirt again. I laughed, sold him one with a brass buckle, and realized I liked that kind of talk better than the stuff that flew around my parents' dinner table. Tessa called again Sunday. "Mom's asking about you," she said. "Worried or nosy?" I asked. She said, "Worried. But you know what that means." I did. "She needs something." "Probably." "Thanks for the heads up," I told her. "Take care of yourself." "You and that baby." "I will," she said, and I knew she meant it. That night I wrote 3 words on a sticky note and slapped it on the fridge door. Keep space. Keep moving. It looked dumb, bright yellow against stainless steel, but it kept my hands from calling old numbers or replying to bait. Some days that note saved me from a dozen bad decisions. The weirdest part wasn't the silence. It was how fast I got used to it. How fast I stopped waiting for someone to toss me a bone and started building my own damn table. I was reaching for the store brand bran flakes when I heard it, Evan, like I'd just stepped off a plane he didn't expect me to be on. I turned, and there he was, halfway down the cereal aisle at Green Hills Market, pushing a half-empty cart with his back stiff and his face pale. He'd dropped weight. Color, too, like someone had drained the tint from him on a slow leak. His cart was full of generic cans, off-brand chips, paper towels with logos I didn't recognize. I nodded once, kept both hands on my cart. No hug, no, "How's your knee?" Nothing like that. "You still around?" he said, like we weren't in the same zip code since I was 19. "I shop here," I said. He walked closer, slow, like I was a stray dog that might bolt. "You look good," he said. "Busy." That word seemed to unlock something in him, because the next sentence out of his mouth was, "Family sticks together." That phrase made my jaw tighten so fast I almost cracked a molar. I waited for the drop, and sure enough, it came. "We could use some help," he said. "Business took a turn. One of our major accounts walked and it's complicated, but if we had $60,000, we could stabilize." He said stabilize, like it was a noble word. Like it wasn't just plugging holes in a boat already halfway sunk. I looked at him, then down at his cart. I said, "What does any of that have to do with me?" He shifted his weight, gave a half smile, the one that used to work on ants and small-town bankers. "We know about your online thing." I blinked. "Cold River leather. You think I'm printing money with belts?" He shrugged, like I just confirmed what he believed. "People say you're doing all right." I said, "People say a lot of things. Doesn't make it true." That's when the mask cracked. He started reaching. "Your brother's under a lot of pressure. The Whitmans are watching every move. It's not just about the business, it's the family." He looked at me like that should mean something, like I was supposed to salute and open a checkbook because Blake's future had a wrinkle in it. I looked past him, at the cereal boxes lined up like little trophies, shouting words like crunch, power, whole grain. I said, "You think I'm going to cover $60,000 so Blake doesn't look stressed at a dinner party?" Dad blinked fast once. "Be a man," he said. I didn't flinch. "I am. That's why I'm saying no." He stared at me like I'd just started speaking another language. Then he muttered, "You've always been ungrateful," and rolled his cart away like that was the closing argument. I stood there another 30 seconds, then walked out with my bran flakes and a six-pack of cheap seltzer. Didn't look back. On the drive home, I couldn't stop thinking about senior year, specifically the year of the red bow. Blake got the Corolla with the big dealership bow on the hood, and I got the Taurus with no gas and half a back bumper. "What helps him helps us," Dad said when I asked. "We're a team." That year I drove Blake to every single one of his college interviews because he needed the focus time, while I took my own night classes by bus. That kind of stuff doesn't leave your bones. I pulled over halfway home, sat there with my hands on the wheel, and just stared at the dash. The air vent squeaked, just like it always had. In my family, family talk was just code for do it our way. Always had been. 10 minutes later, I got a text from Shane. "Pickup game at Parker Rec in 30. You in?" I typed yes, without thinking, threw the cereal in the passenger seat, and headed over. We played 2-on-2 until my shirt stuck to my spine. It wasn't about the game. It was about doing something without checking the family calendar first, about saying yes to myself. The next morning, Cold River sold 2 belts and a bifold wallet. $200 total. I took the money and opened a new savings account online, labeled The Goal, Truck Fund. I hadn't owned a truck since I was 24 and couldn't keep the payments up after the divorce. But I remembered how it felt to throw tools in the bed, to haul stuff without asking, to not rely on anybody. I wanted that feeling back. That same week, I updated the Cold River listings and started planning a fall booth for the Harvest Fair in Anderson. I didn't tell anyone. I just did it. Dad didn't follow up. No texts, no calls. Maybe he thought I'd cave if he gave it a week. But I didn't. I kept stitching leather. I kept sleeping through the night. I kept my phone on silent after 7 p.m. I even bought myself a decent coffee grinder. Something dumb I always wanted but never justified. First cup from it tasted better than 1,000 family dinners. A few days later, Shane asked if I wanted to hit the skate park late one night. I hadn't touched a board in years, but I said sure. We skated around like we were 17 again, laughing at nothing, sucking wind after 2 laps. I didn't tell him about the cereal aisle. Didn't need to. He looked over at me while we were sitting on the curb after, sipping warm water, and said, "You ever think maybe you finally stopped waiting for them to notice?" I didn't answer, but the silence was loud enough. I came home from work that Thursday and found a thick white envelope wedged under my door. No return address, Just my name typed out like it was part of a corporate HR memo. Evan Callahan. I opened it on the kitchen counter, half expecting a lawsuit or wedding invite. It was neither. Inside was a 5-page packet titled, House Budget Session, Immediate Family Only. They actually formatted it like a PowerPoint, with bullet points and suggested discussion zones for who owed what, how things could be restructured, and which family members had available financial potential. My name was highlighted twice. Blake's wasn't mentioned once. I held the envelope over the trash can, felt the edge of it dig into my fingers, then dropped it into the drawer next to the takeout menus. I wasn't ready to trash it yet, but I wasn't showing up either. Next morning, I called in a personal day, drove to Walmart, bought a $29 tent, a camp stove, and a 6-pack of propane. By 3, I was halfway to Congaree State Park, someplace I hadn't been since 5th grade when Blake faked a bee sting to get out of hiking. It rained that night. Not hard, just enough to remind me the tent was cheap. One corner leaked, so I stuffed an old hoodie underneath it and sat cross-legged in the dry half, drinking instant coffee that tasted like dirty pennies. I watched steam rise from the mug and listened to the wind cut through the trees. There were no voices, no phones, no one asking me for a damn thing. By Sunday afternoon, I drove back through Edgefield with my phone still off. Didn't turn it on until I was parked in my spot and had the tent draped over the shower rod. When I powered up, the screen lit up like Vegas. 15 missed calls, all from numbers I didn't know, and one text from Tessa. Things are bad. Call me. We met up the next day at a Waffle House off the bypass. She looked nervous, eyes darting like someone might follow her in. She didn't waste time. Dad lost his biggest client, she said, stabbing her straw into the ice. Pricing dispute. Late shipment. Whole thing imploded. Now the suppliers want cash up front. I nodded once. So, everything's bleeding. Yeah, she said. And there's no bandage big enough. She paused, then added, Blake and Aubrey are fighting. She found messages from 2 women on his phone. There's a third from an app that deletes them. I didn't flinch. Anyone surprised? Tessa exhaled hard. Mom says it's stress. Marissa says he's always been like this. He cheated at Go Fish when we were 11, I said. Everyone called it charm. Some habits get promotions, she said. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept pacing the hall and ended up dragging down an old shoebox from the closet. It was one of those beat-up banker's boxes with Evan written in Sharpie, probably shoved there during some garage clean-out. I hadn't looked in it since I moved out of my parents' house. Inside were birthday cards, spelling bee ribbons, some old progress reports, and under a pile of soccer photos, I found a small stack of bank slips, UTMA account records from senior year. 2 checks stood out, one for Midwest Auto and one for State U Housing, both withdrawn from my account, both dated spring semester. Memo lines said it all. Blake Carr and Blake Dorm. I sat at the kitchen table with the slips in front of me, pressing my thumb onto the ink like I could push the truth back in. The numbers weren't huge, but it wasn't about the dollars. It was about being gutted without even being told. I texted Shane around 10. He replied fast, Beer or court? I chose the gym. Ran for 45 minutes straight. Legs burned. Lungs felt like sandpaper. Didn't care. I wanted to feel something that was mine. By the time I finished, I couldn't tell if I was angry or empty. But I felt my body again. Not theirs. Not what they built. Mine. Orders picked up that week. Nothing crazy, but steady. One guy from Texas ordered a stamped belt with his cattle brand on it. Paid full price, didn't haggle, even tipped me extra to rush ship it. I stayed up till 2 finishing the stitch work. Hands busy, head clear. No time to spiral. The next day, I took the house budget session envelope out of the drawer and set it on the table next to the belt box. I stared at it for 5 full minutes before tossing it back in. I wasn't going. Not like that. If they wanted a summit, it wouldn't be on their terms. They called it budgeting. But I'd seen enough to know what it really was. A final squeeze. One last try to wring out the steady one before the ship went fully down. But I wasn't the sponge anymore. I didn't tell anyone I found the bank slips. I didn't need to. Not yet. Those little pieces of paper already said everything they never would. The doorbell rang at 5:50 in the damn morning. I hadn't had coffee. I hadn't even peed. I opened the door in gym shorts and an old college tee, rubbing my eyes, and there they were. Mom, Dad, Blake, and Marissa, standing shoulder to shoulder, like they'd rehearsed it in the driveway. They all looked like life had wrung them out. Blake had bags under his eyes. Marissa's roots were showing. Dad's belt sat 2 holes tighter, and Mom had that tight smile she wore at funerals and church fundraisers. Mom went for a hug. I stepped onto the landing before she could reach me. The move caught her mid-lunge, and she blinked, like I'd broken a rule nobody ever wrote down. Dad cleared his throat and jumped straight in. "Blood is thicker than water," he said, like that meant I owed them my kidneys. "You couldn't wait for daylight?" I asked. "We didn't want to give you time to say no," Blake said, eyes down. "What an opener," I muttered. "So go ahead. Unpack it." They didn't need much encouragement. It poured out of them like they'd been holding it in too long. Dad's business was on the edge. A second mortgage was chewing through the house faster than interest could catch up. Mom's credit cards were stacked like firewood. High balances, minimum payments. Marissa's husband had been laid off 2 weeks ago and was still pretending he was between offers. And Blake, the golden twin, had been borrowing funds at work like the corporate card was his personal piggy bank. HR was sniffing around, lawyers were circling, and even Blake looked like he knew the crash was coming. "Aubrey posted a statement," Marissa said. "No names, but everyone knows." "She tagged Blake," Mom added. "It was cruel." "She told the truth," I said. Mom sniffed, offended. "It was still public." Dad stepped forward. "We're in a hole, Evan. 120,000 deep. If we don't fix it soon, the house goes. Blake could face charges. It's that serious, and you're coming to me." "We don't have anywhere else to go," he said, voice cracking like he'd earned emotion. I crossed my arms. "Why me?" "You're steady," Mom said. "You keep your head," Marissa added. "We know you always show up," Blake said, barely above a whisper. Every word was meant to sound like a compliment. All I heard was, "You're the one we use." "Not one of you," I said, "has said you were wrong. About that dinner, about the years before it." They all looked at each other like that thought hadn't crossed their minds. "We were just trying to celebrate," Mom started. I cut her off. "No, you were celebrating Blake and reminding everyone that I was the warm-up act." "That's not fair," she said. "It's accurate." Dad looked at the sidewalk like it might open up and swallow him. "We didn't come here to fight. You came to cash in." Nobody argued. I shifted my weight and pointed behind me. "You're not coming in." "I'm not making a decision half awake on a doorstep." "Evan," Mom started, voice already climbing into the guilt register. "No," I said. "Boundaries aren't cruel. We just never had them in our house." They stood there for a beat too long, waiting for something. A sign of softening. A crack. I gave them nothing. Eventually they turned. Blake was last to leave. He looked back once like he was about to say something, then didn't. I closed the door before I could see if he changed his mind. Inside, I made coffee and stood at the counter with my hands flat on the laminate. There was an old picture frame tucked between the knife block and the toaster. A faded photo from our 8th birthday. 2 cakes. Blake's was twice the size with a mountain of icing and little plastic baseball players on top. Mine had a slouching candle and Evan spelled wrong in blue gel. The A had fallen off the letterboard sign in the background. Dad laughed when it happened. Mom said it gave the photo character. I drank my coffee black and cold. I didn't need comfort. I needed clarity. Then I called my therapist. She listened while I explained everything. The doorbell, the plea, the number. When I paused, she said one thing. "If you choose to help, make it your terms, not theirs." That was it. No lecture. Just a line sharp enough to cut through the mess. I wrote it down on the same notepad I used for belt orders. That afternoon, I texted Dad, Come alone tomorrow. We'll talk. If anyone else shows, I'm gone. He replied in seconds. I'll be there. That kind of response doesn't come from confidence. It comes from desperation. I didn't feel good about it, but I didn't feel guilty either. I pulled the shoebox out of the closet and set it on the table. Inside, the bank slips waited like quiet witnesses. I added a notepad and a pen next to them, lined everything up clean. It wasn't a trap. It was just proof. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't laying out the facts for someone else's comfort. I was setting the table for a conversation where I held the chair with the backrest. I'd been the note-taker in that family since I could write. Birthday wish lists, field trip forms, grocery reminders on the fridge because Mom forgot half the time. This time, the notes were going to serve me. Dad showed up right on time, 8 a.m., sharp, dressed like he was going to court. Collared shirt, clean jeans, and the same leather shoes he wore to weddings and wakes. He looked hopeful, which was rare on his face. Almost foreign. I didn't say much, just waved him in and pointed to the wobbly chair across from mine at the kitchen table. I'd cleared the space and laid everything out like a contract meeting. Bank slips, a notepad, a pen, and a mug of plain black coffee. I'm not going to drag this out, I said. If you want help, there are conditions. He nodded once. I figured. I picked up the notepad and read straight off it. First, I want a written apology from every adult who laughed that night. Not some "sorry you felt hurt" garbage. I want the actual words repeated and owned. He blinked but didn't speak. Second, 6 months of family therapy. Minimum, weekly, not negotiable. He looked down at the mug but stayed quiet. Third, Mom gets help. Real help. Budgeting, counseling, whatever it takes. No more swiping credit cards like they're lottery tickets. Still no response, just his jaw tightening a little. Fourth, I'm not handing out lump sums. If you need help, I'll assist with budgeting. I'll make calls. I'll verify numbers. But I'm not handing over a single check. At that, his eyes flicked up, a twitch of insult in them. I ignored it. Fifth, you repay what you took from the UTMA. 18 months. Written plan. No excuses. Now he raised his hand slightly, like he was going to object, then stopped himself. That was a long time ago, he said. I slid the 2 checks across the table. Midwest Auto and State U Housing, I said. Both drawn from my account, both labeled for Blake. He picked them up with careful fingers like they might burn him. I watched his face tighten around the eyes. I don't remember the details, he muttered, which is not the same as saying it didn't happen. He nodded once. Not defensive, not apologetic, just tired. Like a foreman on a job site who already knows the deadline's blown. You pulled money from my account, I said. You gave him a car and a dorm bed. I took the bus and rented an attic room with a shared bathroom. He swallowed, eyes still on the checks. It wasn't supposed to be permanent. But it was. He didn't argue that part. I let the silence stretch until it wasn't comfortable anymore. He folded the checks in half and set them down like an offering. I'll need time, he said. You've got 18 months, I said. The clock starts when I get the apology letters. He pushed his chair back but didn't stand. It feels cold. It's not cold, I said. It's the first honest business deal this family's ever made. He exhaled through his nose, stood up slow. You've changed. No, I said. I stopped pretending this was normal. He left without shaking my hand. Just walked out like the hallway might collapse behind him if he moved too fast. 2 days later, Mom posted a long essay on Facebook. 3 paragraphs about ungrateful children and how today's generation forgets what parents gave up. She never mentioned me by name, but someone from high school tagged me in the comments like it was a game of Clue. I didn't respond. I saved a screenshot to my phone. That night, my phone rang. It was Marissa. She didn't start with small talk, just said, "I'm sorry." For everything she told me she couldn't breathe in that house anymore, that her kids were starting to sound like Blake, entitled, smug, quick to mock. She said clapping at jokes about me had kept the heat off her and her husband for years. Said she didn't know how to undo it but wanted to try. I said, I believe you. We didn't talk therapy or budgets that night. We ate pasta at my place while her 2 kids watched Finding Nemo in the living room. She sat on my couch with a bowl in her lap and admitted she wasn't sure if her marriage was going to make it. Said she was tired of pretending, tired of feeling like a side character in someone else's drama. A week later, I found her an apartment across town, close to her job, 2 bedrooms, safe enough. I quietly paid the $1,250 security deposit. Didn't tell her until the receipt hit her inbox. She cried when she saw it. Said she felt embarrassed. I told her it wasn't charity. It's like putting a board under a broken chair, I said. You don't throw the chair out. You fix it so it holds. That weekend, Cold River moved 3 belts and a wallet, $600 in sales, materials already covered. I built a pegboard on the wall for tools and shipping supplies. Hung it myself. Real wood screws. Looked clean. I told myself if I hit $5,000 in a month, I'd finally buy the truck. Nothing new, just something solid that didn't wheeze every time I turned the key. Then Tessa texted me a screenshot of Mom's post with a big thumbs down and the words, "Proud of you." Nobody in my family had ever said that to me out loud. Not once. Not even when I got my diploma in a stadium where half of them didn't bother to show. I went to bed with the same front door locked the way it always was. But that night it felt different. Like the lock wasn't there to keep people out. It was there to remind me the place inside was mine. I was halfway through cutting a batch of belt straps, brown saddle leather, thick and clean, when my phone lit up. Tessa. I hit speaker and kept working. "It's gone nuclear," she said. The knife paused in my hand. What happened? HR dug into Blake's reports. He was reimbursing himself for things like restaurant tabs, hotel upgrades, even a couple of online shopping charges. Stuff with no business connection at all. "Let me guess," I said. "They fired him. Escorted out. Midday. No severance." I didn't say anything right away. I just set the strap down, wiped my hands on a towel, and leaned against the counter. She kept going. Aubrey's family pulled the plug on everything. Venues, vendors, the dress, the whole thing. Their attorneys handling it now. Some vendors are refunding partials, but others are keeping deposits. Guess it's hard to ask for your money back when your son was texting other women. Tessa didn't argue. Mom's spinning it like he's under pressure. Dad hasn't said much. I hung up after a few more details, then sat down with my laptop and beat them to the punch. Wrote Dad a short, clean email. "My terms haven't changed. I won't meet again without written agreement. You had your shot." 5 minutes later, he replied, "We'll talk." Not yes, not even I understand. Just the same foggy middle ground he always floated in when he didn't want to commit. An hour later, I got another email, this one from Blake. No subject line. It opened with, "Hi Evan, I hope you're well. I've attached my resume. If Low Country Dispatch has any openings, I'd love a referral." No apology, no acknowledgement, not even a, "How are you?" Just straight to the ask. Like I was a stranger with a switch he could flip. I left it unanswered. 2 days later, Tessa and I met for lunch at a BBQ joint near her doctor's office. She looked tired but calm. There was something steady in her voice when she said, "There's one more thing I think you should know." She pulled out a folded photocopy from her purse. I found this cleaning out Aunt Jo's file cabinet. She kept stuff, receipts, handwritten notes, bank letters. I don't think she trusted anyone, honestly. I unfolded it. A note in Dad's handwriting, dated years back. It read, "Move the Evan Fund to cover Blake's freshman tuition. We'll replace it by fall." I stared at it for a long time. Not angry, not even surprised. Just still. Like something inside me had stopped moving, but not in a bad way. In a quiet, heavy way. Tessa watched me. "We all wondered where your share went. Grandma left each of us $2,000. Yours disappeared first. They said it was delayed." I nodded. It wasn't delayed. It was stolen. She didn't argue. I folded the copy and tucked it into my back pocket. Thanks, I said. Really? That night I pulled out the shoebox again. Laid everything on the table. Utma slips, the note, screenshots of Mom's Facebook rant, emails, texts. I moved the earlier Facebook screenshot into it. I didn't do it to sue anyone. I wasn't going public. I just needed my own record, a firewall for the next round of gaslighting. Shane texted me around 9. My buddy's looking for help at the dock 3 nights this week. Overtime pay, easy work. You in? I said yes. The next night I was tossing crates onto pallets and sweating through my shirt, and for the first time in months, I slept like a man who earned every dollar with both hands. Mom left a voicemail that weekend. Her voice was high and strained like she'd been crying for hours. We're about to lose the house. The house where you boys took your first steps. Then she sniffled and hung up without saying goodbye. She wasn't wrong. I did learn to walk there, but I also learned to stay small, quiet, convenient. I wasn't doing that anymore. Cold River posted a short clip on social. Just my hands stitching a wallet with a smooth curve of thread and a close-up of the logo stamp. I added some quiet music, nothing fancy. Orders doubled in 48 hours. I wasn't ready for it, but I didn't hate it. There was something about people choosing your work with their own wallets. No family strings, no guilt, just worth. I took a chunk of the cash and bought a new blade set and a rotary punch that didn't squeak. Labeled a second bin for custom orders and built a crude sorting shelf from scrap wood in the garage. My operation was still small, but it was real. Marissa texted me that night. Got your list. Thanks. Printed it, I'd sent her a few low-cost therapy options, a couple basic budget templates, and a short message. Start with one thing. Doesn't have to be all today. 10 minutes later, she sent me a photo. Her kids were sitting on a bare mattress in their new place, surrounded by coloring books and cereal boxes. They were smiling like it was Christmas. I didn't cry right away. I walked into the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and stared out the window for a while. Then I sat down and let it hit. Not the sadness, not even the regret, just the weight of finally doing something that mattered. And nobody clapped. Nobody said attaboy, which made it feel even more real. Dad showed up again the following Tuesday. Same knock, same front porch, no backup this time. He held his ball cap in both hands like a man waiting for judgment. His face looked heavier, not just tired, aged. The sharpness that used to sit in his jaw had melted into something hollow. I accept, he said. No build-up, no half-step, just that. I didn't open the door wider or step aside. I reached behind me, grabbed the yellow legal pad from the entry table, and wrote it down in block letters. I accept September 12th. He saw me do it and didn't flinch. Just nodded, like maybe this was the cost of getting heard. We booked therapy that afternoon. Maple Bridge Counseling Center, Thursday nights at 6. 5 of us, 1 room, an actual couch, and a folding chair I always took because nobody else ever volunteered for the one with bad legs. The first session, Mom opened with a sigh and said, "We didn't mean it," like that counted as a healing spell. The therapist, a woman named Claire with soft eyes and blunt edges, asked her what she did mean. Mom blinked like someone asked her to perform open-heart surgery with a butter knife. Blake sat hunched in the corner tapping his knee. Same rhythm the whole session. When Claire asked him what he remembered from our childhood birthdays, he grinned like a guy who wasn't sure if it was a trick question and said, "Evan never liked parties." I felt my throat heat up. I didn't look at anyone. "I liked being included," I said. "One year you gave Blake a full set of golf clubs. You handed me a card with $20 in it and a note that said, 'Work on your short game.' I wasn't mad. I was invisible." The room went so quiet you could hear the tissue box breathing. Claire turned to Dad next. "Who decided to pull the UTMA funds from Evan's account?" He looked down at his shoes, then the coffee table. "We always planned to make it right," he said. Not "I did," not "that was wrong," just that. but it was the closest thing to a confession I'd heard from him in 36 years. Back home that weekend, I opened up my laptop and built them a budget spreadsheet. No fluff, just hard numbers. I listed every credit card, every open bill, every subscription. When I got to the lake timeshare they hadn't used in over 4 years, I wrote in red font, "Sell yesterday." I printed the sheet, highlighted the worst parts, and brought it to session 2. Claire read it and said, "This is a start." Mom called it harsh. I called it math. I also drove Marissa to the bank that Friday, helped her open a new checking account without Mom's name on it. It took 20 minutes and broke a chain that had been wrapped around her neck since high school. That same week, Cold River crossed $5,400 in sales. Belts, wallets, 3 custom shoulder straps for a guy restoring an old saddle. I took the money, drove to Greer, and bought a used Tacoma SR5 in slate gray. Nothing flashy, just decent miles and clean brakes. Paid in full. Tossed a rubber mat in the back for deliveries and felt like an actual small business. Between Cold River and dock shifts, the numbers held. The math worked. For the first time since my 20s, I wasn't juggling pennies in my head. The family tried to shift the topic. Blake's legal stuff was getting stickier. Real pressure now, real deadlines, and I could feel the ask coming. So I preempted it in session 3. "My boundary on Blake's situation still stands," I said. "I'll help him find a lawyer who does payment plans. I'll even go with him to the appointment. But I'm not covering fines or fees." Mom looked like I'd slapped her across the mouth. "So we just let him drown?" "No," I said. "We let him swim." She called it abandoning. I called it letting him own his own life. Claire backed me. Friday night, I drove the Tacoma out to the river, parked near the tree line and sat on the tailgate with a sandwich and a root beer. A couple of kids fished 10 yards away, laughing about something that probably didn't matter. I didn't feel young, but I felt honest. That was new. The next Thursday, Claire kicked off the session with something different. She looked at Mom and said, "I want you to describe Evan in 1 sentence. You can't use the words steady or responsible." Mom looked like someone had unplugged her brain. She opened her mouth, closed it, stared at her lap. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I just sat there and waited. And when the silence stretched longer than anything we'd ever shared, I let it land like a weight on the center of the room. That silence, that pause, said more than any apology ever had. The next Sunday, I ran what Dad called budget boot camp at their kitchen table. I showed up with the spreadsheet printed in color, line items highlighted, notes in the margins. Mom had made coffee. Dad had the mail stacked neatly, like that'd earn him points. We started with subscriptions. 6 streaming services, gone. Nobody was watching anything but reruns of NCIS and Wheel of Fortune anyway. Next was the jet ski collecting mold under a tarp in the garage since 2018, listed online within the hour. Then came the lake timeshare. "That's our future," Dad said, frowning at the cell in red font. "No," I said, tapping the spreadsheet. "It's your past, and it's bleeding your groceries." He looked at me like I'd spit in his chili but didn't push back. Mom was the harder sell. She clutched a store credit card like it was an oxygen tank. "That's for emergencies," she said. I asked, "What counts as 1? She paused, looked around like the answer might be hiding in a drawer. Then she said, "When I need new linens." Claire's voice echoed in my head. "Name the thing. Name what you're really saying." I didn't argue. I just marked the card with an asterisk and said, "No more emergencies for 90 days. Let's see how that goes." Dad surprised me that day. He signed payment plans with 2 suppliers, agreed to late fees, and didn't raise his voice once. It was the first time in my life I saw him eat crow without chewing the feathers off first. I noted the date and amount in my pad. Later that week, Blake called twice from a new number. Didn't leave a voicemail the first time. The second time he did, said interviews weren't working out, his car payment was overdue, and could I spot him until next month when things settle. I didn't call back. I didn't even think about it long. Just deleted the message and went back to stitching a belt for a guy in Ohio who paid up front and didn't expect a brotherly discount. At therapy that Thursday, I brought copies of the old checks and the note from Aunt Joe's files. I laid them out on the low table in the center of the room. "We don't need to dig up fossils," Mom said, crossing her arms like she was bracing for wind. "The fossil is why we're here," I said. Claire nodded toward Dad. "What do these documents mean to you?" He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Finally, after a long pause, he said, "We favored Blake," then added, "We thought Evan would be fine." It landed harder than an insult, because it was the truth, and the truth was heavier than any excuse he could have cooked up. That night, I got a voicemail from Aubrey. Her voice was quiet, almost embarrassed. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry about that dinner. You didn't deserve that." A few hours later, I got a forwarded screenshot from someone I hadn't heard from in years, a group chat message between the Whitmans. One line, "At least we dodged the placeholder twin." I saved it to the ledger folder and didn't respond. The lake timeshare sold that week. Not for what they'd hoped, but for what the market gave. Dad wanted to hold out for a better offer. I said, "The house doesn't get to keep wants if the fridge can't keep milk cold." He signed the closing documents without another word. I found Blake a labor gig with Shane's buddy, loading trucks 5 nights a week. The kind of job you show up to sore and leave sore. I texted him the contact info and said, "It's yours if you're sober and on time." 2 days later, he texted back one word. "Maybe." That was it. Not thanks. Not I'll try. Just maybe Mom posted another one of her vague Facebook graphics. A sunflower this time with the words, "Forgive and forget or be bitter forever." Marissa, God bless her, commented publicly, "We're in therapy." I laughed out loud in my kitchen, so hard I had to sit down. That laugh hit something deep in my ribs. That's the moment I knew my sister finally meant it. Sunday evening, after going over next month's bills, Dad walked me to the door. He didn't say much, just looked at my hands as I grabbed my keys. "Thank you," he said. Just that. No speech, no pitch. He didn't even look me in the face. Just stared at my fingers like he was noticing what they actually do for the first time. I got in the Tacoma and sat there a minute before turning the key. I didn't know if that thank you was the best he had or if something else was coming down the line. I didn't trust it, but I wrote it on the pad anyway. Underlined it twice. The last Thursday of that stretch. We met at Maple Bridge at 6 p.m. sharp. Rain tapped the windows in that soft, nervous rhythm, like it wasn't sure if it wanted to pour or hold back. I sat in the same folding chair I'd used since session 1, left foot flat on the floor like keeping it there meant I wouldn't drift back into old habits. Claire, the therapist, opened with a question. "What's one thing you wish you'd said 20 years ago?" Mom went first. "You were always dependable," she said, like that was a compliment wrapped in gold foil. Claire asked her to try again. No labels, just truth. But Mom blinked twice and stayed quiet. Claire moved on. Dad looked at his hands for a long beat, then took a breath that didn't shake. "We were wrong," he said. "I was wrong." His voice didn't break this time. It steadied. He looked right at me and said, "I loved the idea of Blake succeeding because I thought it made me look like a good father. I didn't see you because you didn't make me look shiny. I used you because I knew you'd take the hit. I'm sorry. No if, no but." He named everything. My checks, the car, the dorm, the birthdays, the dinner. Then he looked at Claire and said, "I'll read whatever apology Evan wants me to out loud. I'll sign it. No edits." She asked him to say one more thing. Say, "I was cruel." He didn't hesitate. I was cruel. That silence afterward was heavier than anything I'd carried. But it wasn't crushing. It was clarifying. Mom cried, not loudly, not for show. She didn't defend herself this time, which for her was as close to a confession as I was going to get. She said she wanted to start a group, Spending Recovery, and asked if Marissa would help her stick to a shopping list. Then Blake spoke. He didn't look at anyone for a solid minute. Then he cleared his throat and said, "First time Dad called Evan second place. We were 9. I laughed because Dad laughed. I've been laughing ever since. Because it was easy." He looked up at me and added, "I've always loved you. I just never stood up because it kept the wind at my back." Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a key fob, set it on the table between us. "It's the Lexus IS 350F Sport," he said. The car he'd treated like a museum piece for 3 years. "Title's signed over to you. I can't afford it, and I shouldn't have it. You drove me to practice every day for 6 months in high school when my car was in the shop. I should have said thank you then. I'm saying it now, I didn't reach for the keys." I asked him one question. "Why now?" "Because," he said, "I want you to have something you didn't have to hold together for everybody else. Because it's the only clean thing I can do right now." Claire turned to me. "What do you need to hear from them?" I said, "I need to hear that I wasn't the practice twin." Dad didn't miss a beat. "You were the son we leaned on, not the son we lifted up. We're going to lift now." And for once, it didn't sound like a line. We walked out to the parking lot together. The rain had finally let up. Just puddles and reflections left. Blake pressed the fob into my palm and said, "I'll take the bus to the dock job." I told him, "If you show up on time for a month, I'll drive you. Not out of pity, out of respect." He nodded. No jokes, no smirk, just nodded. I drove the Lexus home slow, hands tight on the wheel, feeling ridiculous for grinning at a dashboard. I parked it next to the Tacoma. 2 vehicles, one earned, one offered. I didn't say a word. I hung the keys on the wall hook like any other tool in my house. In the kitchen, I grabbed a Sharpie and stuck one more note on the fridge. My terms. My life. Then I opened the drawer where I'd kept the house budget session envelope all this time. I tore it clean in half and dropped it in the trash where it belonged. If it were you, would you take the keys or walk away and finally set your own terms? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Even a quick line helps. And if the story hit home, please like and subscribe. It's just one click for you, but it means a lot for us.
YouTube picked this for you. Tap it. Let's see if they guessed right.